So this one has been really highly touted, and there's some trivia here as well that we'll talk about as we go throughout the show. But Robbie, we're going to start with you. Can you give us your rating of episode 3, of The Last of Us? Sorry, long time episode 3 of The Last of Us. Thank you.
Start with the rating. I'm giving this a 5.5 out of 6. Really, really enjoy it, but I think something that we'll dive more deeply into later is the fact that we mentioned this pre-show, but we want the story of Joel to like continue, and this took a step back from that. Even though there was parts that did progress Joel's story, I wanted more time with them before we did a segue to something else. That's my only negative with this. The story that they told with Bill and Frank, it was wonderfully done. From start to finish, and we talked about this in our last review, that we like going back in time and seeing how people are progressing. So this one did a perfect job of that, going all the way 20 years back. Then it was like 3, then it was like 4, then it was like another 3, and then it was like a 10-year jump. Like, so this giving us so much insight into the past was super, super enjoyable, and then getting to see it through Bill and Frank's lens was awesome. I loved all of that. My only negative is that I just like, could this have waited till episode 6? Like, putting it at episode 3 seemed like an interesting choice to me, because we're just getting to know Joel and Ellie. So that was my only negative. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that negative, and I'm going to give this a 4.5 out of 6. I really enjoy, you're nailing this, like everything they're doing in terms of pre-event on September 23rd is riveting. It's filling in gaps. It's jarring. So the visionary approach of the skeletons with the blankets, and then the next shot is the mom and the baby. That's good stuff. It's painful. It hurts. And it's really good storytelling. My problem with this episode, and it's the weakest of the 3 in my opinion, which is why I find it fascinating the critics really enjoyed it, is attention was so off of Joel and Ellie for so long that I keep getting told that Joel's a badass. And the only evidence I have of him being a badass is him surviving this thing and hitting the old lady in the first episode with a wrench. That's all I got right now. I believe he's a badass.
Yeah.
I've seen implications, and people that look scary in this show say he's really scary, don't mess with him. But I'm done hearing, and again, I haven't played the game. All the game people say he's a badass, right? So I just want to see this. I want to see it in action. I want to see him and Ellie go survive. And I think this episode struggled with that. I think the relationship was interesting. And I think if you were going for that, that was awesome. And I could see why you'd love that and give it a 6 out of 6. But for me, that's where it was lackluster. Isaac, go ahead.
Wow. I mean, I feel like I'm a guy on this podcast that pretty routinely gives things very good scores initially when I see them. And there's no exception. I give this episode a 6 out of 6. It's man, all 3 of these episodes have been 6 out of 6s for me. So I'm trying to think it's really hard to rank them right now. They've all been just phenomenal in their own right. But I thought the story of Bill and Frank is just so well done. Nick Offerman we'll get into this a little bit. Ron Swanson. We'll get into this a little bit later, but I am so sad that we're not going to get to see more of him in this series, because he just absolutely kills this episode. Like, he is the reason this episode is so impactful, I think. So sad about that, but man, he did such a phenomenal job. I absolutely loved basically everything about this episode. I think you have a point, Robbie. It does kind of like, I don't want to say it detracts, but it does take a major sidestep and completely avoid, I mean, from, minute whatever 5 to 45, it's all Bill and Frank's story.
Right.
It's
which
more like minute 10 because you do get that scene in the gas
Sure.
station where Ellie is engaged with the clicker.
Right. Yeah. There's definitely some pre stuff, but I mean, the big chunk of this episode is all Bill and Frank. And I was kind of, before we got into this episode, I was kind of thinking they would be intertwining it, like, their stories and stuff like that. No, it was once Bill and Frank's story started, it was Bill and Frank until their story ended. And
Yeah.
I actually kind of appreciated that because when it came time to, when Joel and Ellie came back into the story, man, it just capped off their chapter so well. So while I do think it deviated quite a bit from kind of the main storyline, I know too, just from playing the game, I mean, we're gonna get a ton of Ellie and Joel getting to know each other through the rest of this series. So for me, it was not like detrimental to my interest in this story. So I can see why that is a little bit of a knock in some people's opinion. For me, it did not detract from this episode at all. I
And I
absolutely
can see
loved it.
also why, as a video game player too, Isaac, like why you know the context of where this is going, right? So I think for you, you're like, I got plenty of time to spend with Ellie and Joel. This is a good filler because in the game I didn't get this much filler. So for
Right.
spoilers for those that have not played the game, Bill and Frank are split in the game. And there's essentially, I won't get into spoilers of how Bill dies for the game if you want to go back and play it, but Bill does pass in a different way. And I think it's important to note that Druckmann took the liberty to change that and really spend quality time on this relationship, which I think was a risk. And obviously the critics loved it. And I do understand for the sake of TV, you have to be more than the two main characters, I think. I understand that decision.
Right.
When you're building a story like this, you really have to build up the Tesses and you have to build up the Bills. I totally understand that perspective of the argument. But you're talking to the guy of the three of us. I'm the guy who has no gameplay experience. You're selling me a product right now of every poster is Joel and Ellie. It's everything. And they're, especially Joel, is barely in the show right now. And it's kind of bothering me now. In the first two episodes, I was like, episode 2's ending was great. I was like, okay, Tess is gone. It is Joel's time. Here we go. It is now Joel moment. And then he sidesteps again. Rob, I think you made a great point. Episode 6, great way to put it. This would have been a much better strategic spot down the line. I think that's a really good point in my perspective.
Right. I just don't know, and I don't know how Bill fits into the game, but that might be an issue. Like, there's no way it could have been later because you need that Bill connection. You need Joel probably to get all those supplies, right? Because now he has everything that he needed.
That's kind of like why it wouldn't work down the road, because the reason Bill is in this story is to basically give Joel all the things he needs to set them off on their journey. So it unfortunately does need to be like right now, because otherwise it just wouldn't really make sense down the road unless they completely deviated from the video game story,
which would make people more upset than anything.
Right. And there are people, I think most of the critics are pretty excited about this episode, but I have heard definitely some complaints that, they're definitely deviating from the video game with this episode. And even if you keep watching the, how it's made, like HBO does an awesome, little clip of how it's made afterwards. Neil Druckmann talks about how this is the biggest deviation from the video game is this episode.
Right.
Well, and I would say, like, me and Max actually, we hit on this and we actually cut it up for a TikTok if you want to go check out our TikTok or social media. But like, you can make deviations in video game stories and shows as long as it doesn't deviate from like the main storyline. Like, this isn't going to affect a big portion of the main storyline. Like, Bill and Frank are just a piece, right? So you can create this, and I am totally fine with them creating this and having their creative property with it, especially when it's done well. Like, we hit on that. Like, when things are done well and you can make it work, as long as you didn't change Joel and Ellie completely and what happens with them completely, it's fine. So this is why I feel like this episode is completely okay, and that's why it's still a great episode, and it doesn't like make me like more uninterested in this show at all. If there was a way to move it later on, would have been the only thing, but obviously that would have been difficult because he needs all those supplies, which I assume are going to play a huge role in the episodes moving forward. So that's the only little thing. It's just like, because like Max is saying, we just got Joel and Ellie, just them together, and they
If I've
just
got
had
10
this
hours
tragic death.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I'm just like, last thing, they just had this extremely tragic death that we learn by the end of this episode was even more deeply impactful to Joel than we realized. And now we just didn't get to see them work through that yet. And I'm assuming we will, but like, we just had that and we got a snippet of it. And now we have to wait another week. Is my only negative thought. If this was a streaming platform and I could just go instantly to the next episode, I probably don't care, and it's probably a 6 out of 6. Right? Like I think that's a little bit of a change. That's just a tiny little bit of a change in my opinion.
I wanna talk a little bit about that because I talked about this, I think, with several different people, Jarrett specifically, and with Scott Higa about Andor. Because there are people out there still who could not get through the first 3 or 4 episodes of Andor because it's slow story building.
Grind.
Those first 4 episodes. And I mean, I enjoyed them thoroughly for sure. They're not the most exciting episodes of television out there, but they made everything seem so impactful, just the little things that they were doing, and the payoff for that was incredible. So this is what I'll say to that. I think that the slow build, the slow burn that we're going to have with Joel and Ellie is going to pay off majorly in the last 3 episodes of the show. And I think, yeah, there's definitely a piece of we want to get to know the main characters more. But I think if they're pushing that for a better payoff, I'm okay with that. It's definitely tough to wait week to week. I mean, when we're used to all these streaming services who are just bam, 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 like Netflix, binge everything right now, definitely is a different mindset than what we're kind of used to right now. But that's why we're talking about this on this podcast and on